Hi guys, my name is Viola and I'm interviewing my dad about his 1997 Everest summit climb with Nova. They filmed a documentary and he was on a team with famous climbers like Ed Viesturs, David Breashears, and a few other awesome ones. I'm a naturally curious person, so I decided I wanted to interview him about it even though it's like 30 years later. So, welcome to the series My Dad Climbed Everest and I Have Questions. I originally made this series for TikTok, so that's the reason it's formatted this way. These are basically like compilations of those videos. So if you want to check out my TikTok, the link is in the bio. Here are the topics we're covering in today's video. So first we're talking about how we got the opportunity to climb Everest in 1997 and what it was like to climb with such high caliber climbers like the ones I mentioned before. And then what it was like climbing with David Breashears specifically, because quite a few people wanted to know about that. Then we also discussed how people perceive his Everest experience. Lastly, we talk about who Elizabeth Hawley was and how it was meeting this famous Everest journalist. I hope you enjoy.
In probably late 96, I think it was in December or so, I finally realized I had time to go on a big expedition in 1997. I talked to both Guy Cotter, who owned, at the time, he still owns Adventure Consultants out of New Zealand. Guy had bought Adventure Consultants from Rob Hall's wife in New Zealand after the '96 disaster. He got killed on Everest. So I talked to Guy about going, and he said there was room on the expedition. And then I also talked to Ed Viesturs, and Ed kind of hooked me up with the Nova people, the PBS Nova documentary people. He was going there to shoot a documentary on the what happens to the cognitive function at high altitude. And so kind of all this intersected at the same time with Adventure Consultants and with Nova. And so thanks to Ed and Guy, that opportunity unfolded for me in 1997. It was a great opportunity, and I learned a lot on that Nova expedition. David Breashears was on that expedition, Ed Viesturs, obviously, Pete Athens, a guy named Veikka Guffinson from Finland, and Tashi Tenzing, and then Guy Cotter, and myself. And it just kind of was like the world-class group of climbers. And here I am from Indiana climbing with these guys. I was really intimidated to be with them because they were such a great group of climbers and good people, good solid people. And so, the rest is history, as they say. And we shot that documentary for Nova, which was a really great documentary on climbing Everest and the cognitive function at Everest. Somebody asked what it was like to climb with such a high caliber group of climbers. It was David Breashears, Pete Athens, Ed Viesturs, and Guy Cotter were kind of that core group. I was totally intimidated to be climbing with those guys. I mean, I looked up to those guys, and I didn't want to screw up anything. So, I tried to learn from them. I would listen to every word they said about climbing up there and absorb everything. I tried to learn multiple things from those guys, especially Ed and Dave. They were wonderful teachers and mentors to me. But I would wear the same thing they had on that day from a clothing perspective. I would walk in the same route that they walked on, and I tried to copy them as much as I can, because that was the only way I was going to survive this thing and also get on top and get back down. David Breashears, what a wonderful person. I learned a lot from Dave. I observed Dave a lot. I asked a lot of questions. I would try to wear what he was wearing every day, and I would follow in his footsteps whenever I could. And he was very forthcoming with if I asked a question, he'd give me advice. He'd tell me what to do. And I got along with him. He had a sense of humor. He was very intense. He's a perfectionist, and he didn't want to get on that bad side. But man, he would have been a great college football or basketball coach. Um, and he is the type of person that you would want in a foxhole next to you when the shit started getting bad. He's the greatest guy up there. He's done a lot for Nepal. He truly loved Nepal and truly loved the Nepalese people. His work in Nepal, especially with glacier works that monitored melting glaciers, um, has benefited a lot of people in Nepal. And he is truly missed, um, especially in Nepal. And but wonderful, wonderful person.
The question is, how do people perceive my experience up there if they haven't been up there? You know, I don't really think about it that often. It's kind of hard to explain what it was like. And it's nice being around guys, the guys that were on the climb, because we don't really talk about it. But, you know, we don't psychoanalyze any of it. No, it's not hard being around people that haven't experienced that. You know, my big experience in my life was climbing Everest, and other people have different stressful situations in their life that I probably wouldn't relate to. You know, maybe they were fighting cancer or something, and they beat it. And so, yeah, I never think of that. Did I meet Elizabeth Hawley? And I did meet Elizabeth Hawley in 1997. I was at the Yak and Yeti Hotel, and it was after the climb, and it was the day we got into Kathmandu from Lukla. And I was with David Breashears and Ed Viesturs, Pete Athens, and it was pretty incredible to meet her. You know, I've read a lot about her. She was probably in her 80s at the time, and she drove around Kathmandu in a VW, like an old VW with a stick shift, and so she was well known. And she showed up at the hotel and asked to see us. We came down, and she interviewed us about the climb, and we talked a little bit. Since we were doing the standard route on Everest, there wasn't a lot to talk about, but I think she probably really wanted to talk to David and Ed just to check in and see how they were doing. She's intimidating, she's kind of crusty, no bullshit with her, and the interesting thing is I kind of think I hit it off with her because she had lived in Indiana for a while, for a few years, I think out of college, and then she moved to Kathmandu at some point. But she'd lived in Kathmandu all her life, not all her life, but for quite a long time, and was well known in the climbing community for her record keeping. And I'm not really sure who's doing it now. You know, she died about 10 years ago, and was cremated in Kathmandu, and she's missed quite a bit. Do I still have a relationship with the person, the people that saved my life? And yes, I do. I saw Ed Viesturs a couple weeks ago in Washington for a reunion on Mount Rainier. Great guy. I feel like I owe him my life, and he saved my life. But the other team members, Guy Cotter, who owns Adventure Consultants, email back and forth with him. He lives in New Zealand, so I haven't seen him since '97, but I've crossed paths with him when I've been in Nepal, but I've never seen him. I mean, he was at base camp during the earthquake one year, and I was just about an hour from base camp, and I could hear him on the radio, but my goal was to see him, but we didn't see him. Some of the Sherpas that were on that team I have run into in Nepal, and one of them, I went to his son's wedding in Kathmandu in 2022, and I was with you. and he was one of the Sherpas that was with me at Camp 3 on the Lhotse Face when Ed was giving me the Heimlich maneuver. Elizabeth Hawley's job, she was a reporter on her own, started record keeping for on all the climbs in the Himalayas that came through Nepal. And she kept records on who was climbing and what routes they were climbing on. And then she would interview the climbers immediately when they arrived back in Kathmandu and ask them some very pointed questions about the route if they had taken photos, what time they hit the summit, if they did hit the summit. She did her research. She knew the routes. She knew what the summits would look like. She knew what the weather was on certain days. So there was no getting around it. She could always confirm if somebody actually did climb to the summit. And every once in a while, she smelled some poop every once in a while and called somebody out because maybe they weren't being honest on their summit climb. So it's pretty cool.